Previously on the Chronicles of the Crisis. They're here to talk about Set.
Accidentally creates an angry outburst of chaotic energy.
He
interrupts.
I knew you'd be a traitor and a monster, Set, his brother declares. But I never thought you'd be a coward. As the dust settles in the royal palace, a storm begins to form outside. Instead of bringing cleansing rain, the thunderous skies bring high winds that turn up the sands of the desert. A sandstorm. While the late afternoon sun turned the world orange, the sandstorm plunges Duat into darkness, not unlike a moonless night. Mortal and god alike seek shelter from the choking dust and harsh winds. The palace, fittingly, becomes as dark and lonely as a tomb. The blood on Set's claws is still warm. He stares down at his handiwork, the butchered corpse of his own brother, Osiris, in silence. His hands are still shaking from the ghastly deed. Part of him can't believe he actually did it. He had just gotten so angry. All he'd seen was red. He knew he'd wanted to hurt Osiris in his rage, but to kill him? How could he have done such a thing? The last image of his wife still lingers in his mind. Her horrified face when she saw what he'd done. How she and Isis thought he was so monstrous. He would come after them, too. What was he supposed to do now? He hadn't meant for this to happen. He knew he needed to take action. That's what he'd always been good for. The dark deity shakily stands up, trying to avert his gaze from his brother's corpse. He needed to tell someone. He needed help! But who would listen to him? Isis and Nephthys had run away at the sight of him. They would surely tell anyone they encountered what had happened. And Set knew that he himself would not receive help. Would be demonized now more than ever before. And he would deserve it, wouldn't he? At this realization, Set's remorse begins to turn into fear. Would the other gods imprison him for this? Kill him like Thoth had always wanted? Would it be right to fight against them? Did he have the right to argue for his own life when he had so carelessly taken Osiris's away? Not even Nephthys would be there for him after this mess. His feet start moving without him fully realizing it. Set runs out of the palace and into the storm, as his answers are out there, somewhere in the haze. He has to try to fix this somehow. But what would it cost him? Who could he turn to? Of course. After stumbling about in the haze, the desert god manages to find his way to the dock where Ra's solar barge lands every day. He can just barely see the glowing ship moving down to the sky. The At's head is shielded from the storm by the Grand Creator God's magic, so Ra himself is completely unfazed by the high winds. He docks the sun barge as usual, and is pleasantly, or perhaps unpleasantly, surprised to see his grandson already present on the dock. As Set steps to the magical shield and out of the swirling sands, however, Ra sees the state he's in. The dark deity is visibly shaken and is still covered in blood from the incident. "Grandfather, I fucked up," he says. "Tell me everything," Ra responds. Nephthys and Isis, meanwhile, are having difficulties making their way through the sandstorm. Isis is in hysterics, still sobbing over the horrendous sight she and her sister stumbled upon. Nephthys is far more stable than her sister at the moment, but Isis is the one leading the way. The queenly goddess doesn't know where she's going. just knows that she must run like her life depends on it. And she'll be damned if she leaves Nephthys behind to get cut down by that monster like her husband was. She should have done more to stop this from happening. She could have done something! She could have... Isis is ripped out of her thoughts by her sister's voice. Nephthys sounds uncertain, but she sees what looks to be an opening in the rock ahead of them. Perhaps a place where they can take shelter. Isis does what she can to collect her bearings. Then the two of them make for the cave. Once inside, Isis practically collapses. The proud queen has fallen hard. She can't get the image of her beloved lying there, butchered and disgraced, out of her head. In just one day, not even a day, an hour, she had lost everything. And they had been warned about this. She feels guilty and powerless, like she's had the very life crushed from her body. What would happen now? Would Set hunt them down? What about the other gods? The mortals? When had the gods ever turned on each other before? They were supposed to be a family. Nephthys is equally in shock, of course. She had put so much faith in their mentor's warning being wrong. She had argued with her sister on Set's behalf, had tried to rebuild bridges Set had already burned. Would Set have really killed them, too? Had she really known her husband at all? The thought makes her chest twist in pain. She loved Set so much. Why couldn't that be enough? The goddess of sorrow realizes how bleak their situation is. This was really happening, and no amount of wishful thinking would change it. She looks over to her sister for a lifeline. Isis was normally the stronger of the two, the one who always had a plan. But Isis is a wreck. She's slumped down against the wall of the cave, too emotionally spent to keep crying. Nephthys makes this scary realization that she is going to have to step up and be the strong one for once. Where to start? What should she do? What should she say? I'm sorry, she starts. I should have listened to you. Isis is quiet for a few moments. Don't blame yourself, she responds weakly. If I had listened, this wouldn't be happening, Nephthys insists. Isis gently asks her to stop, and says that she can't handle talking about it right now. She needs some time to let the shock ebb away. Reluctantly, Nephthys drops the topic, and she falls quiet. All they can do now is wait for the storm to pass, then find out what to do from there. The sandstorm eventually passes during the night. Poor Isis sleeps for ages, while Nephthys is left alone with her thoughts for a little while. When the two of them finally exit their shelter, it's well past sunrise. And they see a glowing beam of light in the distance, right over the palace! It's Ra! He's sending out an obvious signal to the other gods, calling them back to the palace, to the scene of the crime. After the issue with Geb and Newt 2 years before, the sun god usually does his best to avoid intervening in the other gods' affairs. In this case, however, he has no choice. There is no king now to oversee the issue for him. The greatest of all the gods has to step in. Isis and Nephthys are relieved to see a friendly sign after the traumatic experience of the night prior. Although Isis is understandably on edge and wary, they begin to make their way back to the palace. It's not like they can go anywhere else. And Ra will surely keep them safe, right? They encounter their Aunt Sekhmet and Uncle Sobek on the way there. The two older deities are also responding to their father's summons. Thoth is nowhere in sight. But if he were here, he'd probably be raving and spouting "I told you so" the whole way there. While Selbek and Sekhmet don't know the details of what's going on, they do know that something serious must have happened for Ra to come down from the sun barge. Sekhmet is on a warpath to reach her father, disregarding her nieces entirely. For her, his word is law, and she recognizes that he wouldn't wouldn't descend from the solar barge without reason. She storms past Isis and Nephthys without so much as a second glance. Sobek, while he might be on the, denser side of things, isn't stupid. He can tell that something is wrong, and, unlike his sister, he's kind enough to check on the twins. He slows to a stop and asks them if they're alright. They look like they've been through hell, after all. Seeing as Isis is still burnt out from the experience, Nephthys timidly explains the events of the night prior from their point of view. In hearing their story, their uncle takes pity on them. The crocodile god gives the two tired goddesses a ride to the palace so they can at least rest their feet on the way there. He assures them that Ra will know what to do. He always does. When they arrive, Ra is waiting for them in the entryway. Sekhmet is already at his side. He sees how frightened his granddaughters are, so he assures them that it's safe to come inside. Sobek can't fit through the door, so they're on their own now. Isis asks him outright if he knows what happened, to which Ra tells her that he does. She asks what he's going to do about Set, and Ra goes quiet. He doesn't seem to have made up his mind yet. Nephthys, on the other hand, asks Ra how he found out about Osiris's death. Set told me, he says. And, as if on cue, Mr. McMurderface decides to reveal himself, though he makes a point to keep his distance. Isis is shocked to see him, of course, and demands to know why he's here, why Ra is letting Osiris's murderer go unpunished. Ra explains that Set openly confessed the crime, and that he is the reason they are having this meeting at all. He states that, under normal circumstances, Set would technically be next in line for the throne now that Osiris is dead. In hearing this, Isis points out that she is Osiris's wife, and that she should succeed him in the event of his death. She won't accept Osiris's murderer as his successor. Set finally decides to speak up for himself. He pointedly tells his sister that just because he doesn't want to be king, that it doesn't mean he's alright with her being queen either. She can choke on the crown for all he cares. Ra interrupts their squabbling, assuring Isis that he will be doing nothing of the sort. He has no intention of making Set king, citing the dark deity has to be punished somehow. Set shuts up pretty fast, backing off. He knows he's in trouble. The incident still weighs heavily on his conscience, too. He doesn't want to make the same mistake he made with Osiris. Even if he hates his sister, he has to hold back his anger. Isis asks why they don't just execute Set. The dark deity had no problem ripping Osiris apart, so why should they give him the luxury of living? She equates simply not giving Set the crown is the equivalent of slapping him on the wrist. It isn't a real punishment. She wants him to suffer. Nephthys, meanwhile, is appalled by all of this. She refuses to side with either of them. She doesn't want to kill her husband, even if she is disturbed by his sudden act of savagery. Ra agrees with the Sorrow Goddess's stance. He states that they have already experienced one death, and that he does not want to add another life to the toll. The Sun God further declares that he cannot bestow the crown upon Isis in good faith if she intends to use that power to execute the dark deity. Instead, he turns to Nephthys and suggests that she should take up the crown, as she would be a neutral party. She is still technically Osiris' sister, after all, and she seems the most level-headed out of the three of them. As you can imagine, this surprises all three of the remaining siblings. Both Isis and Set look to Nephthys to see what she will decide. Of course, Nephthys has already made up her mind. Absolutely not! She does not want the responsibility of ruling Egypt upon her shoulders, and she does not want to have to choose between her husband or her sister at all times. Seeing as all three siblings are either unfit or unwilling to rule, Ra finds himself in a tough spot. He will have to fill in the duties of the pharaoh then, on top of his solar duties. Sekhmet is immediately supportive, of course, as she's practically her father's biggest fan. Thankfully, all the deities present can at least agree on Ra's authority. After all, he was handling such duties before Osiris' coronation. The sun god isn't too happy about it, though, mainly because of how exhausting moving the solar barge is on its own. Now he'll have to go back to how he used to do things. And, well, he's not getting any younger over here. Just because the matter of kingship has been settled, though, the gods' troubles are not over. Isis is out for revenge, while Set is too stubborn to back down from her challenges. From here on out, the bloodshed is only going to get worse.